Welcome back, everyone. This is Angel Miller with peopleofshambhala.com, and this evening I'm going to talk about the influence of Freemasonry and the occult on visual identity in the contemporary world. Probably most of you will know that I've had a couple of books published on Freemasonry. The latest one that is available right now is Freemasonry Foundation of the Western Esoteric Tradition, which was put out in September in 2014 by Salamander and Sons. And in a few weeks' time, I'm going to have a third book published, which will explore Freemasonry, esotericism, and Islam over the last couple of hundred years. And I think there's quite a few surprises in there. But this evening we're going to look at the visual aspects of Freemasonry, the symbolism of the occult, and how this has seeped into popular culture, especially in music and in fashion. And this is a subject that sort of conspiracy theorists and Illuminati types often get very excited about, and sometimes there's some truth to what's being said. A lot of the time, maybe they don't really quite grasp the context, or some things are definitely exaggerated. But I hope to enlighten a little bit. So we'll make a start. Well, looking at Masonic symbolism, the best place to begin is probably the Masonic tracing board, which, for those who have not seen an example of one, essentially they are paintings of the Masonic symbols. Often there are little scenes incorporated into them, so you may have a symbol of the square and compasses along with a scene of a bridge with a running river and this kind of thing. And these historically have been displayed in the lodge during the ritual, and the lodge explains the symbols to the new initiate so that he understands the symbols of Freemasonry for that particular degree. That's important because those scenes and those symbols later on become incorporated into other maybe Hermetic or occult rituals and degrees, but also into popular culture. Before we go on, however, I wanted to address one issue, and I recently heard a quote-unquote scholar of the subject claiming that this was how rational thinking was taught, and that essentially it was a rational process, and that it was right at the beginning of the Enlightenment era, and somehow Freemasonry and Enlightenment were tied together. And I just want to address that. First of all, it should be said that there's really nothing rational about the use of symbolism. It's not that it's irrational, of course, but it's certainly non-rational. It's partly intuitive, it's partly aesthetic, but rational it is not. Certainly, one of the problems with the occult world, and perhaps Freemasonry as well, is that there's a definite dearth of rational thinking. But at the same time, that's not the be-all and end-all. You don't get art and poetry and music and culture through rational thinking. You really don't. So I don't want to overemphasize that either. But more broadly, the idea that Freemasonry and the Enlightenment have gone together is, I think, very much exaggerated. You might find elements of Enlightenment thought in Freemasonry, and occasionally you do, but I think the thing to bear in mind is that the Enlightenment was very much against not only religion, most especially Christianity, of course, because that was what was immediately around in France and Europe when these ideas were coming up, but it was also against symbolism and rituals more broadly. So in a certain sense, you could say that Freemasonry is actually a counter-Enlightenment movement, that at the very moment during the 18th century that philosophers were saying, no, symbolism is bad, religion is bad, mystery is bad, you have a real explosion of rituals and symbols and mysteries and this kind of thing. And of course, Freemasonry was not the first movement or organization or body to use symbolism, and far from it. And this is something we find all across the world, and particularly in antiquity. And Monsieur Eliade, for example, in his book The Forge and the Crucible, has demonstrated pretty conclusively that ancient blacksmithery or metallurgy was tied to various societal religious rituals and functions, and the blacksmiths actually served in a kind of priestly function as well. And even looking around the world, even today, for example, the Iranian or Persian martial arts that are practiced, which is actually very ancient. There too, you find that weapons used by the Iranian martial artists are actually regarded as symbols, for example, of defeating evil and this sort of thing as well. Which is in a way close to Freemasonry in certain respects, and what Freemasonry did at the beginning of the 18th century, and going back a little before that certainly as well. It took the tools of the stonemason's trade and made them symbols of perfecting oneself and spiritual advancement and this kind of thing. And the ritual is more complicated than that, but that's a large element. So moving on to today, Masonic and occult imagery, although often exaggerated by conspiracy theorists, it certainly does show up in modern culture. Jay-Z's Rockaware clothing brand has certainly incorporated the Masonic square and compasses and other types of Masonic imagery in its t-shirts. There's another really interesting streetwear brand called Black Scale, which is very cool. They've used the Masonic symbolism and even the Ordo Templi Orientis symbolism, which was the occult organization headed by Aleister Crowley at the beginning of the 20th century. It was actually founded originally as a Masonic body, but it didn't actually receive any legitimacy from any grand Masonic lodges. So it kind of went off in its own direction. And sticking with that kind of world at the moment, sort of hip-hop and streetwear, the hip-hop artist Rick Ross has the song Freemason. So it certainly shows up, and one particularly surprising way that it's incorporated today is in the realm of gender, I've noticed. And for example, True Religion, clothing brand, has a cologne for men out, and on the packaging there's an image of Rebus, which is from alchemy, and it's a hermaphrodite, half male, half female figure standing by a plant with various sort of spheres on it, sort of reminiscent of the Kabbalah, and certainly that's unusual packaging to appeal to men, but even more interestingly, perhaps, several years ago there was a movie, and also it's on Broadway at the moment as a musical, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which it seems to be a sort of very campy, light kind of play about a guy from Eastern Europe, from Eastern Germany, trying to get out of the Soviet bloc, who changes his gender, let's say, and winds up as a sort of singer going across America, singing in various diners. But actually, if you listen to the lyrics of the song, and if you pay close attention to the narrative of the movie, it's all based on Plato's Timaeus. And there are some references to, I think, a couple of Greek gods, and Thor is mentioned, but beyond that, maybe slightly trivial sort of references. It actually is based on Plato's Timaeus, and the idea in that that at the beginning of time, human beings had 2 heads and 4 arms and 4 legs, and that we were cut in half, and that we've spent our entire lives now searching for quote-unquote our other half. And it's actually a really interesting movie when you realize that that's what's going on. And of course, David Bowie early on, known for his sort of gender bending, made some nods towards the occult. He mentions the Golden Dawn and Crowley in one of his songs, but again, I don't think it's particularly profound, though it's an interesting connection. But just to wrap up and say what's going on, I think there are 2 things. One, from a purely sort of aesthetic perspective, or perspective of the creator, is that the creator is kind of curating different elements together. So in Hedwig, you have this sort of very flamboyant modern America, kind of transvestism and flamboyance, and maybe sort of fashion in a way, with these sort of archaic elements, and similar things you find elsewhere. So it's kind of curating different ideas together to come up with something new, and maybe something that's not entirely as trivial as it looks, right? Something that really has staying power for thousands of years. But the other aspect is that it is, in a way, kind of creating a sort of expression of mysticism, an expression of meaning. The modern world can seem a little bit trivial sometimes, and obviously media has for quite a while wanted us to sort of focus on shopping and this kind of thing, and maybe that's changing now with the explosion in yoga and meditation and this kind of thing. But these kind of realms of entertainment have managed to, although have a very entertaining kind of gloss and very modern gloss to them, do seem to be representing themselves as, in a way, expressions of something much more ancient, an expression of the mysteries. And I think that's really interesting, and spiritual people certainly, I think, will be interested in that. But I think it's also important to kind of appreciate what it comes in, and the more modern aspects as well, and to realize that very ancient things, timeless ideas can be represented even in the most modern of ways. Well, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this very brief podcast, and I'll certainly post information about my book, The Crescent and the Compass, when that's available. And, I hope you come back soon. Thanks very much.